Modern gaming looks incredible. Bigger worlds, better graphics, endless updates. And yet, something feels missing. Ask anyone who grew up with a PlayStation 2, and you'll hear the same thing. They just don't make games like they used to. Back then, games weren't built around seasons, battle passes, or microtransactions. They were built around ideas, around ambition, around developers taking wild risks just to see what would happen. And somehow, those risks worked. The PS2 era wasn't just a phase, it was a golden age. A time when studios cared more about fun than formulas, when creativity mattered more than monetization, and when one disc gave you the entire experience. No patches, no live service promises, just pure, unforgettable gameplay. What's even crazier? Some of those games, released over 20 years ago, still outshine many modern titles today. They weren't perfect, but they were bold, they were complete, and they respected the player. So today, we're looking back at the PS2 games that didn't just age well, they still put modern gaming to shame. Let's go back to when games were fearless. Number 20, Resident Evil Outbreak. Long before online co-op became a selling point, Resident Evil Outbreak was already experimenting with ideas the industry wouldn't fully embrace until years later. Instead of turning survival horror into fast-paced action, this game doubled down on tension, only now, your survival depended on other real players. Set during the fall of Raccoon City, Outbreak forced players to work together under pressure. Communication mattered. Resources were scarce. And every character brought unique abilities that affected how puzzles were solved and how combat unfolded. One careless teammate could doom the entire group. What made the experience truly special was how vulnerable it felt. You weren't a super soldier, you were a regular person trying to survive chaos. Limited voice communication and slow movement made every decision feel dangerous, especially when panic set in. Capcom was simply too early. Online infrastructure couldn't support the vision properly at the time, but the concept was rock solid. Today, as co-op horror thrives, Outbreak feels less like a relic and more like a blueprint modern games are still trying to perfect. Number 19, Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec. There was a time when Gran Turismo wasn't just a racing game, it was the racing game. And Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec represents the peak of that legacy. Released early in the PS2's life cycle, it immediately set a standard that many racing games still struggle to reach. What made it special wasn't just realism, it was respect for the player. With nearly 200 meticulously detailed cars, deep tuning systems, and layered difficulty, the game welcomed both casual players and hardcore racing fans. You could play it your way, at your own pace. Progression felt earned. Winning races mattered. Improving your driving skills mattered even more. There were no shortcuts, no microtransactions, just mastery through repetition and learning. Visually, the game was stunning for its time, and mechanically, it was precise. Even today, many fans argue the series has never quite recaptured the purity of A-Spec. It focused on driving first, and that focus is exactly why it's still remembered so fondly. Number 18, Soul Calibur 3. The PS2 had no shortage of fighting games, but Soul Calibur 3 stood apart by understanding something crucial. Depth doesn't have to come at the cost of fun. Instead of button-mashing chaos, it emphasized timing, spacing, and precision through weapon-based combat. Every strike felt deliberate. Every duel felt personal. The game rewarded skill without punishing experimentation, making it accessible to newcomers while still satisfying competitive players. What truly elevated Soul Calibur 3 was its ambitious content. Beyond standard modes, the game introduced a robust character creator that let players design their own fighters, choosing weapons, styles, armor, and abilities. That alone massively increased replay value. Combined with beautifully designed arenas and a wide-ranging roster, the game felt complete in a way many modern fighters don't. Even as the franchise continued on newer consoles, fans often look back to the PS2 entries as the high point. Soul Calibur 3 didn't just fight well, it respected creativity, and that made all the difference. Number 17, Dragon Quest VIII. Dragon Quest VIII wasn't just another entry in a long-running franchise. It was the moment the series truly broke into the mainstream. For many players, this was their first exposure to Dragon Quest, and it left a lasting impression. The game's world felt alive. Towns were distinct, characters were expressive, and the cel-shaded art style, designed by Akira Toriyama, translated perfectly into 3D, making the adventure feel like a living anime. While the turn-based combat was familiar, it was refined and satisfying. What really stood out was the sense of journey. Day-night cycles, wide-open landscapes, and constant discovery made exploration rewarding rather than overwhelming. The story didn't rely on shock. It relied on charm, humor, and emotional weight. It trusted players to stay invested without flashy gimmicks. Even today, Dragon Quest VIII remains a benchmark for how traditional RPG design can feel timeless when executed with care and confidence. Number 16. Okami. Few games look like Okami. Fewer still feel like it. Instead of chasing realism, Okami embraced artistry. Its watercolor, ink brush visual style made every environment feel hand-painted, turning gameplay into something closer to interactive art. Even years later, it remains instantly recognizable. But beauty wasn't its only strength. The celestial brush mechanic allowed players to literally draw on the screen to solve puzzles, alter the environment, and fight enemies. It wasn't just creative. It was intuitive and deeply satisfying. The game blended mythology, exploration, and combat into a cohesive experience that respected patience and curiosity. Nothing felt rushed. The world unfolded slowly, inviting players to absorb its atmosphere. While modern games often chase graphical fidelity, Okami proved that strong artistic direction ages far better. It wasn't just different, it was fearless. And that fearlessness is exactly why it still stands tall among the PS2's greatest achievements. Number 15. Need for Speed Most Wanted. There was a time when Need for Speed didn't just chase trends, it defined them. Most Wanted was the moment the franchise perfectly balanced arcade chaos with open-world freedom. It wasn't just about winning races, it was about building a reputation, dropping players into a massive city full of shortcuts, hidden jumps, and secret routes. The game made exploration feel essential. Every race pushed you higher up the blacklist, while every police chase felt like a cinematic action scene. The longer you stayed on the road, the more intense the response became. Helicopters, roadblocks, and sheer panic included. What made it unforgettable was the attitude. Cars weren't just vehicles, they were statements. Customization mattered. Rivalries felt personal. Even the live-action cutscenes, cheesy as they were, added personality and stakes. Modern racing games may look better, but few feel as exhilarating. Most Wanted understood that speed is fun, but danger is what makes it memorable. Number 14. Dark Cloud 2. Ambition is risky in game design, and Dark Cloud 2 was nothing but ambition. Instead of focusing on a single genre, it blended dungeon crawling, time travel, city building, crafting, fishing, and action combat into one surprisingly cohesive experience. At its heart was a simple but brilliant idea. Your actions in the present directly shaped the future. Rebuilding towns wasn't cosmetic. It affected story outcomes, character relationships, and available rewards. Every decision felt meaningful. The art style was charming and timeless, while the weapon system encouraged experimentation rather than grinding. Instead of endlessly replacing gear, players upgraded and evolved weapons, forming a stronger connection to their tools. Modern games often struggle under similar ambition. Dark Cloud 2 made it work through smart pacing and clear vision. It didn't overload the player. It trusted them. Even today, it feels like a lost blueprint for how creativity and complexity can coexist without chaos. Number 13. Black. First-person shooters today come in many flavors, but Black understood something most don't. Sometimes bigger, louder, and more destructive is better. Developed by Criterion, this PS2 shooter felt like playing inside an explosive action movie. The gunplay was the star. Every weapon sounded heavy, aggressive, and powerful. Reloading felt tense. Firing felt impactful. Explosions weren't just visual effects. They reshaped the battlefield. Walls collapsed. Cover disappeared. Chaos ruled. What made Black stand out was its commitment to spectacle. It wasn't about realism for realism's sake. It was about intensity. The game embraced destruction as a mechanic, making environments feel reactive rather than static. Even without multiplayer, Black left a lasting impression because it knew exactly what it wanted to be. In an era of safe design, it went all in on excess, and it worked. Number 12. Kingdom Hearts 2. On paper, Kingdom Hearts should never have worked. Disney characters mixed with anime-style RPG combat sounded absurd. But Kingdom Hearts 2 didn't just work, it perfected the concept. Where the first game experimented, the sequel refined everything. Combat was faster, smoother, and more expressive. Worlds were larger and more detailed. The story leaned fully into its emotional complexity without holding back. What made it special was balance. Light-hearted Disney charm coexisted with surprisingly deep themes of identity, loss, and friendship. The narrative was confusing at times, but unforgettable. Boss fights demanded skill, exploration rewarded curiosity, and the soundtrack amplified every emotional beat. Even today, few action RPGs match its flow and personality. Kingdom Hearts 2 wasn't just a sequel. It was proof that bold ideas deserve full commitment, and when they get it, magic happens. Number 11. Ultimate Spider-Man. Many Spider-Man games exist, but Ultimate Spider-Man captured something rare, the feeling of being Spider-Man. Instead of chasing realism, it leaned into comic book authenticity with a bold, cel-shaded art style that still looks incredible today. The world felt alive, colorful, and playful. Swinging through the city was fast, fluid, and joyful. Combat emphasized agility and wit, matching Peter Parker's personality perfectly. What truly set it apart was perspective. Players didn't just control Spider-Man, they also played as Venom. 2 campaigns, 2 playstyles, 2 very different power fantasies that kept gameplay fresh and engaging. The writing respected Spider-Man's humor without turning him into a joke. The story felt straight out of the comics, enhanced by panel-style cutscenes that reinforced its identity. Even with newer, technically superior entries, Ultimate Spider-Man remains one of the most faithful adaptations of the character ever made. Number 10. The Mark of Kree. The Mark of Kree never got the spotlight it deserved, yet it quietly influenced action games for years to come. Instead of mindless button mashing, it introduced a targeting-based combat system that required awareness and strategy. Enemies were assigned to specific buttons, forcing players to think before attacking. Visually, the game stood out with its Polynesian-inspired art style and watercolor aesthetic, giving it a unique identity among PS2 titles. But beyond looks, it respected player intelligence. Combat rewarded precision, timing, and positioning, rather than speed alone. More importantly, it represented an early shift toward culturally inspired storytelling in gaming. While many games chased realism, the Mark of Kree proved that originality and mechanical innovation could coexist and still feel incredibly satisfying. Number 9. Suikoden 3. Suikoden 3 took ambition to an entirely different level. Featuring 3 separate protagonists with intersecting storylines, the game allowed players to experience the same conflict from multiple perspectives. It wasn't just storytelling, it was world-building on a massive scale. With over 100 recruitable characters, each with unique motivations, the game made every ally feel meaningful. Choices mattered, alliances shifted, and the narrative adapted accordingly. Combat added further depth through formations and large-scale battles that felt cinematic and strategic. In an era where many RPG characters feel interchangeable, Suikoden 3 gave its cast genuine identity. That depth is exactly why the game remains one of the most emotionally rich RPGs of the PS2 era. Number 8. The Simpsons Hit and Run. The Simpsons Hit and Run proved that licensed games didn't have to be lazy. Borrowing the open-world structure of GTA, it translated Springfield into a fully playable, interactive playground, and somehow made it work perfectly. The writing felt authentic, the humor landed, and the voice acting brought the show to life. Every mission felt like a playable episode, packed with jokes, references, and chaotic fun. Driving through Springfield wasn't just transportation, it was comedy. Despite its rough edges, the game nailed what mattered most: tone. No other Simpsons game has captured the spirit of the series so completely. Even today, it stands as the gold standard for how TV adaptations should be handled in gaming. Number 7. SSX Tricky. Before realism dominated sports games, SSX Tricky reminded players that fun comes first. Loud colors, exaggerated tricks, trash-talking rivals. Everything about the game screamed personality. Racing down mountains wasn't just about speed, it was about style. Pulling off massive tricks, chaining combos, and boosting past opponents felt exhilarating. Every track was a spectacle, and every race felt like an event. Later entries toned things down, but Tricky embraced excess unapologetically. It understood that video games don't need restraint to be engaging, they need energy. That fearless commitment to fun is exactly why players still remember it so vividly. Number 6. Ratchet and Clank. Up Your Arsenal. Up Your Arsenal represents the peak of Ratchet and Clank's PS2 era chaos. It doubled down on absurd weaponry, fast-paced combat, and humor without taking itself too seriously. The game expanded everything. Bigger worlds, crazier guns, more modes. From arena challenges to side missions and multiplayer, there was always something new to do. Weapons evolved as you used them, encouraging experimentation instead of repetition. Unlike later entries that leaned heavier into emotional storytelling, this one focused on pure entertainment. It was loud, ridiculous, and endlessly replayable. Sometimes, that's all a game needs to be. Number 5. Burnout 3. Takedown. Burnout 3. Takedown wasn't about racing clean. It was about destruction. Winning wasn't enough. The game rewarded you for crashing into opponents at full speed and causing absolute chaos. And somehow, it felt perfect. Every race encouraged aggression. Taking down rivals filled your boost meter, turning reckless driving into a core mechanic rather than a mistake. Add crash mode, a puzzle-like spectacle of cinematic wrecks, and the game became endlessly replayable. What made it special was how complete it felt. No DLC, no updates, everything was there on the disc. Modern racers may look prettier, but few feel as instantly satisfying. Burnout 3 understood one thing clearly: fun comes from momentum, impact, and mayhem, and it delivered all three flawlessly. Number 4. Star Wars Battlefront 2. Before modern live service shooters, Star Wars Battlefront 2 delivered massive battles that actually felt like Star Wars. You weren't just watching the galaxy, you were fighting in it. Large-scale multiplayer maps, iconic vehicles, and playable heroes made every match feel cinematic. Whether you were piloting an AT-AT or charging in with a lightsaber, the scale never stopped impressing. What truly set it apart was balance. Alongside multiplayer chaos, the game offered a full single-player campaign that added emotional depth to the universe. No microtransactions, no paywalls, just pure content. Even today, few games capture the fantasy of being a soldier in the Star Wars universe as completely as Battlefront 2 did on the PS2. Number 3. Devil May Cry 3. Devil May Cry 3 is the moment the series truly found itself. Fast, stylish, and unapologetically confident, it defined what action games could be. Combat wasn't just about winning, it was about how you fought. Style rankings pushed players to experiment, chain moves, and dominate enemies with flair. Dante's personality, humor, and swagger made every encounter feel fun rather than exhausting. The difficulty demanded skill, but never felt unfair. Boss fights were memorable, weapons felt distinct, and the soundtrack elevated every fight into a spectacle. While many modern games chase complexity, Devil May Cry 3 focused on mastery. That focus is exactly why it still stands as one of the greatest action games ever made. Number 2. Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X marked a turning point for the franchise, and arguably its emotional peak. It introduced voice acting, fully 3D environments, and a story that hit harder than most players expected. The narrative explored faith, sacrifice, and loss, with maturity rarely seen in games at the time. Characters felt human, flawed, and deeply memorable. The turn-based combat was refined through the sphere grid, giving players freedom without confusion. Every element worked together: music, visuals, gameplay, and story. It felt complete, intentional. Even decades later, Final Fantasy X remains the last truly traditional Final Fantasy experience for many fans, and one that modern entries still struggle to match emotionally. Number 1. Grand Theft Auto: San Andreas. GTA San Andreas wasn't just a game. It was a playground. A massive open world filled with freedom, chaos, and personality that still feels unmatched. It gave players RPG-like customization, memorable characters, and a story that balanced humor with serious themes. You could ignore the main story entirely and still feel like you were living inside the world. Unlike later entries, San Andreas embraced absurdity without restraint. Jetpacks, gyms, haircuts, cheat codes, secrets everywhere. Modern GTA games may be more polished, but none feel as wild or liberating. San Andreas represents a time when games weren't afraid to be ridiculous, and that's exactly why it remains legendary. Which PS2 game do you think still puts modern gaming to shame? Did we miss a classic that deserves to be on this list? Drop your favorites in the comments. Like the video if this brought back memories. Subscribe for more deep dives into gaming's greatest eras. Now, let's see which game truly refuses to be forgotten.